From the moment Sheduer Sanders' name was called on draft night, the football world's reaction was mixed. Some polite applause, some skeptical head tilts, and a whole lot of raised eyebrows from people who thought they had him figured out. A fifth-round pick with limited practice reps? To the doubters, that sounded like a backup story waiting to happen. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. They saw the headlines about his late draft selection. They noted his lack of traditional preseason reps. And they wrote the narrative before the kid even stepped onto the field. And then came Rich Eisen. If you've been around sports media long enough, you know Eisen doesn't throw his weight behind a player lightly. But in the midst of a wave of lukewarm predictions and dismissive takes, he didn't just support Sheduer. He went on offense for him. He took aim at the lazy narratives, calling out sources who were leaking half-baked opinions about Sanders' readiness. He even name-dropped the New York Giants, pointing out the irony in trusting the judgment of a team whose own personnel decisions had been, let's just say, less than spotless. Eisen's point was simple but devastating. You can't judge a quarterback's future on surface-level impressions, especially when those impressions are built on flawed scouting intel. And Sheduer Sanders, according to Eisen, wasn't just some late-round flyer. They were talking about a player with legitimate football education, one who had been mentored by a Hall of Fame mind since childhood. That last point is the one Eisen kept circling back to. Sheduer didn't just learn football in a film room. He grew up in it. His father, Deion Primetime Sanders, isn't just a legend for his playing career. He's a sharp, adaptive football thinker who's been shaping Sheduer's instincts for years. That's the part critics tend to overlook. You can't replicate that level of mentorship with a few extra practice reps. The way Sheduer reads a defense, his ability to stay calm in collapsing pockets, his comfort with adjusting at the line, those aren't rookie gifts. Those are the results of years of seeing the game from a coach's perspective. And sure enough, the first time Sheduer got the chance to actually take NFL snaps, everything the doubters had been saying evaporated. The ball came out of his hand with precision. His reads were clean. He wasn't rattled. He wasn't rushing. If anything, he looked like the calmest guy in the stadium. For a rookie with supposedly limited preparation, his execution was startling. Every pass felt intentional, every drive controlled. What struck his teammates most wasn't just the stat line, it was the confidence. You could see it in the way he walked into the huddle. The cadence was sharp. The commands were clear. No hesitation. By the second series, you could feel the sideline shifting. The same players who'd seen him as the kid getting a shot were now treating him like the guy who could run the show. And that's the part of the story the critics never saw coming. You can doubt a player's arm strength. You can doubt their footwork. But if you doubt their ability to lead, and they prove you wrong, the effect is seismic. Within days, reports started leaking about how much respect Sanders had earned inside the locker room. Defensive veterans were praising his preparation. Receivers were talking about his touch and timing. Coaches were raving about his film study habits. This is where the narrative flipped. And not just because of performance. Sheduer wasn't coasting on talent. He was working like someone who knew the odds were stacked against him and had no interest in leaving them that way. The early mornings, the late nights, the constant communication with position coaches. Even opponents noticed. One defensive back reportedly said after the game, "He plays like he's been here before." So where does Jimmy Haslam come into all this? Here's where Eisen's frustration was aimed. The Browns' owner, despite having this potential spark sitting on his roster, had reportedly been lukewarm on giving Sanders meaningful reps early on. The perception, whether entirely fair or not, was that Haslam wasn't fully sold on the idea of building around Sheduer, or even giving him a real audition for the future. It's the kind of old-school thinking that keeps franchises chasing their tails, betting on pedigree over performance, on draft status over day-to-day proof. Eisen's take was blunt. You don't ignore what's right in front of you just because it doesn't fit the plan you had in April. Plans change. Football is about recognizing when you found something and having the courage to lean into it. And in Eisen's eyes, Sanders had shown enough poise, accuracy, and leadership to earn more than a token nod from the owner's box. The irony here is rich. While other franchises are scrambling to find leaders at quarterback, the Browns might already have one, and they're hesitating. Meanwhile, Sheduer is quietly dismantling every doubt that followed him into the league. That's why Eisen's defense landed so hard. It wasn't just about proving the haters wrong. It was about calling out an organization for not seeing the value in their own player. But let's be clear, none of this success is about luck or family name. Yes, having Deion Sanders as a father gave Sheduer unique insights into the game, but that advantage only matters if you put in the work. Plenty of athletes with famous parents flame out because they don't match their talent with effort. Sheduer is doing the opposite. Every snap he takes is backed by hours of unseen grind. His college career already hinted at it. The accuracy numbers were elite. The decision-making was mature. He wasn't just padding stats. He was managing games, controlling tempo, and making the kind of reads you usually see from upperclassmen. That skill set transferred immediately to the NFL, even with the leap in speed and complexity. And here's the real takeaway. Sheduer's rise is a reminder that the NFL still undervalues certain intangibles. You can measure a quarterback's arm strength at the combine. You can time their 40-yard dash. But you can't easily measure how they command a room, how they earn respect from veterans, or how quickly they adapt to adversity. Those are the traits Sheduer is built on. For the Browns, the next step is obvious. Keep feeding him reps. Let him grow into the role, instead of keeping him behind an artificial wall of development time. The locker room's already bought in. The fan base is starting to buzz. And with every game, the media is shifting from can he to when will he? For the critics who lean on the New York Giants, Intel, or similar shaky sources, the egg's already on their face. The Giants themselves are wrestling with their own missteps, which makes their early judgment on Sanders even less credible. If anything, this whole saga should make teams rethink how they evaluate prospects, especially late-round ones. Draft position is a starting point, not a ceiling. And for Sheduer himself, this is only the beginning. The road ahead is going to have bumps. Rookie quarterbacks always hit them, but if his debut is any indication, he's got the resilience to weather those stretches and come out sharper. He's not just playing the position. He's redefining what readiness looks like for a rookie. In the end, Eisen's passionate defense of Sanders wasn't just about sticking it to bad takes. It was about spotlighting a player who embodies what teams claim to want: talent, preparation, and leadership. If the Browns, and specifically Jimmy Haslam, can't see that, the rest of the league certainly will. And if they're not careful, they'll be watching Sanders lead someone else's franchise in a few years. Right now, Sheduer Sanders isn't just proving he belongs in the NFL. He's showing that the old formulas for evaluating quarterbacks might be due for an overhaul. And the sooner the Browns realize that, the better their chances of keeping the story theirs instead of letting it become the one that got away. What Eisen tapped into, and what the Browns' ownership has yet to fully grasp, is that Sheduer Sanders' story isn't just a good rookie moment in a preseason game. It's a blueprint for how modern quarterbacks are breaking into the league. In the old NFL, you drafted a rookie, especially a later round one, and stuck him on the bench for a season or two. Let him learn the system. Let him adjust to the speed of the game. But Sheduer's rise proves that if the mental makeup is already there, waiting is just wasting time. From day one in Cleveland, Sheduer treated the opportunity like a business transaction. He wasn't there to be a quiet understudy. He was there to turn heads, win respect, and position himself as a future franchise cornerstone. That's why he was in the building earlier than most veterans. That's why his playbook notes looked like they'd been through a semester of college coursework. That's why receivers talk about how he approaches them after every route in practice to fine-tune timing and adjustments. These aren't just good habits. These are leadership habits. And the thing about leadership is that it doesn't wait for permission. It shows up when it's needed. Contrast that with the perception coming from Haslam's box. The reports Eisen was reacting to painted a picture of an owner who still saw Sheduer as a developmental curiosity, someone to be stashed behind more experienced quarterbacks until some undefined future point. The problem is, football doesn't wait for the calendar. When a player's ready, the worst thing you can do is ignore it. Eisen's sharpest criticism was saved for the people who couldn't see what was happening in real time. If this kid's giving you poise, accuracy, and control from his first series, he argued, what exactly are you waiting for? That's not a plea for instant promotion. It's a warning about wasted momentum. Confidence is a living thing in the NFL. When a rookie quarterback is hot, you want him taking every meaningful snap you can give him. Of course, Haslam has his reasons. Owners think about the long game, the franchise image, the politics of the depth chart. Benching or bypassing veterans for a rookie send a message, not just to fans, but to the locker room. The trouble is, the locker room might already be sending the opposite message back. Reports of veteran players openly praising Sheduer's leadership aren't just fluff. They're signals that he's earned a level of trust most rookies can't get in year one. And here's where this story gets even more layered. Sheduer's path into the NFL was rocky by design. Fifth-round picks are basically told from day one. You'll have to prove yourself more than the other guy. Limited reps in camp, smaller voice in meetings, fewer first-team looks. The assumption is that the top draft picks will carry the early burden, while guys like Sheduer wait for scraps. Instead, he used that scarcity to sharpen his game. Every throw in practice had to count. Every read had to be clean. Every interaction with a coach had to show progress. That's why the narrative of limited practice reps was so misleading and why Eisen went after it. For people who understand football, fewer reps don't necessarily mean less preparation. In Sheduer's case, it meant higher efficiency. Every snap in practice became a mental dress rehearsal for a game. By the time his number was called, he wasn't just familiar with the offense. He was fluent in it. The most telling part of his debut wasn't even the throws. It was how he handled the moments between plays, calling protections, moving receivers into position, resetting his feet under pressure. These are things most rookies don't fully master in their first season, but they were already baked into his game. That comes from upbringing, not just coaching. Deion Sanders didn't just raise his son to play football. He raised him to see football differently. The film study, the pre-snap recognition, the what's next mindset, that's why Sheduer looked like a veteran from the first series. And yet, the doubt still lingers in certain corners of the organization, fueled by outdated thinking and a stubborn commitment to the plan. That's what Eisen was pushing back against. You can't talk about wanting to win now while keeping one of your most composed, efficient quarterbacks in bubble wrap. Haslam's perceived reluctance to fully back Sheduer also feeds into a broader conversation about NFL ownership and control. Owners like certainty. They like knowing the face of their franchise is someone they've invested big money and draft capital in. Sanders doesn't fit that mold. He wasn't a big money investment. He was, by the book, a value pick. And it's almost as if that label has created a ceiling in the owner's mind, one that doesn't match what's actually happening on the field. That's the danger of pre-drafted expectations. They can blind decision-makers to reality. If Sheduer had been drafted in the first round and played exactly the same way, there'd be no debate. He'd already be splitting reps with the starter. The only thing holding him back from that scenario now is the number attached to his draft slot. In the locker room, however, the draft slot is irrelevant. Teammates don't care where you were picked. They care about whether you can get them ball, keep drives alive, and win games. And Sheduer has already proven he can do all three. When a rookie wins over the vets that quickly, it creates a shift in the team's chemistry. Suddenly, the guy the owner sees as a maybe-later project is the same guy the players see as why not now. It's also worth noting how Sanders has managed the media through all of this. He hasn't clapped back at critics. He hasn't complained about reps. He hasn't even acknowledged the skepticism directly. Instead, he's let his performance and preparation do the talking. That a veteran move in a rookie's body. And it's the kind of maturity that turns short-term momentum into long-term credibility. For all the talk about Sheduer being unprepared for the league, what's actually emerging is the opposite. A quarterback who was overprepared, whose biggest challenge now is convincing people in power to believe their own eyes. Eisen's defense didn't come from blind faith. It came from watching a player make all the right decisions, on and off the field, and still be treated like a question mark. If the Browns are smart, they'll recognize what they have before someone else does. Because quarterbacks like Sheduer don't come along often, guys who combine raw talent with deep football intellect, who walk into a huddle and make it theirs, who turn limited opportunities into undeniable evidence. Haslam can keep playing the long game if he wants. He can stick to his original blueprint. But the risk is that the game passes the blueprint by. The NFL rewards decisiveness, and right now, the decisive move is clear. Lean into what Sheduer Sanders is already showing you. Not as a PR stunt, not as a gamble, but as an acknowledgement of reality. Because if the Browns hesitate too long, this won't just be a story about a rookie exceeding expectations. It'll be a story about an organization that had the answer in their hands and didn't trust themselves enough to use it. And in the NFL, missed opportunities have a way of haunting you long after the headlines fade. Week 1, the spark that starts a fire. The Browns open the season with their veteran starter under center, playing it safe, grinding out a narrow win. Sheduer doesn't take a snap, but he's on the sideline glued to the iPad, tracking every defensive look. Cameras catch him whispering to receivers about adjustments after drives, little moments that don't go unnoticed by fans watching closely. The veteran starter thanks him in the post-game presser for spotting a coverage tendency. It's subtle, but in the locker room, guys are already thinking, this kid's more than a backup. Week 2, the first taste. Midway through the third quarter of a game that's slipping away, the veteran QB takes a hard shot and has to sit out a series. The stadium roars when Sanders jogs onto the field. First play, quick slant, crisp throw, 12 yards. Second play, play action, deep comeback route on the money. The drive stalls in the red zone, but Sanders walks off to a standing ovation. The Browns still lose, but the post-game narrative is all about the rookie's poise. Local radio callers are already saying, give the kid a shot. Week 3, pressure cooker. In a high-profile primetime matchup, the Browns offense sputters early, down by 17 in the second half. The coaching staff turns to Sanders. He immediately engineers a 75-yard touchdown drive, spreading the ball to 3 different receivers, mixing in a scramble on 3rd and long, and hitting a back shoulder fade that has the commentators losing their minds. Cleveland loses by a touchdown, but Sanders' numbers, 9 of 11 for 128 yards and a score, become the talking point on every sports show the next morning. Week 4, the test drive. The Browns face a soft secondary, and the coaches announced before the game that Sanders will start the second half regardless of score. The first half is ugly. 3 turnovers from the starter, no rhythm on offense. Sanders comes in to start the third quarter and never looks back. 2 touchdowns, no picks, and a victory that feels like a turning point. He's calm in the post-game interviews, giving credit to his O-line and downplaying his performance. But everyone can see it. He's making it look easy. Week 5, Haslam's dilemma. By now, the whispers are shouts. The fan base is split, half demanding Sanders start immediately, the other half clinging to veteran security. Haslam is reportedly unmoved in his plan to let the rookie develop. But the numbers don't lie. Sanders has a higher completion rate, a better touchdown-to-interception ratio, and far more explosive plays per drive. Rich Eisen doubles down on his earlier defense, saying on air, if this kid isn't starting by midseason, the Browns are just wasting time. Week 6, the statement game. Sanders gets the nod after the starter tweaks a hamstring in practice. He's up against a division rival with playoff aspirations. This is where he either cements his status or falls back to bench. What happens? He plays the cleanest game of any Browns quarterback in years. 0 turnovers, 3 touchdown drives, and a couple of gutsy third-down conversions that make even the most skeptical analysts admit, this guy has it. Cleveland wins by 10. The locker room is electric. Week 7, owner under fire. National media is now openly questioning Haslam's reluctance to commit to Sanders as the full-time starter. The Browns are in playoff contention, and every extra win matters. The pressure isn't just from fans. It's from within the organization. Assistants, coordinators, even position coaches are pushing for Sanders to stay under center. The word momentum starts getting thrown around a lot, and the argument becomes simple: you don't pull a hot hand in the NFL. Week 8, the rivalry road test. On the road against a hostile crowd, Sanders shows his maturity. No panic in the pocket, no sloppy mistakes. He goes 21-27. Takes a couple of sacks rather than force bad throws, and leads a last-minute drive to set up the game-winning field goal. The win puts Cleveland in the division lead. Haslam's wait-and-see plan is effectively dead at this point. Pulling Sanders now would be a PR disaster and a locker room mutiny waiting to happen. Week 9, the coronation. By now, Sanders is officially the guy. Press conferences revolve around his growth, not whether he's earned the job. The veteran quarterback publicly praises him for how he handled the transition. Sanders, ever the pro, talks about learning from the veteran's example and keeping the team-first mentality. The Browns are legitimate contenders, and the energy in Cleveland feels like it hasn't in decades. And that's how it happens. Not in one dramatic benching. Not in a single jaw-dropping throw, but in a series of moments that build trust, belief, and inevitability. Eisen's point from the start holds true. If you have a player who's showing you he's ready, the smart move is to give him the keys before someone else hands him theirs. If Haslam drags his feet, this timeline could stretch longer, but the arc won't change. Sanders is too composed, too accurate, and too respected to be just the backup for long. The only question is how quickly the Browns front office realizes that the future they've been planning for might already be here.